All right, you ready? I've got 4 messed up Reddit stories for you won't forget. Drop a like and subscribe if you want more. Let's get into it. I, 25F, found a sleeping bag hidden in the ceiling crawl space of our dorm building. The photos inside were all of me and my mother. Posted to r/let's not meet 3 days ago. So I need to get this out because I have not slept properly in 4 days and my hands are still shaking when I think about it. I am 25, female, and I work as an art restorer for the university, specifically old oil paintings in gilded frames that the campus collection has been neglecting for decades. My mother, Diane, manages the custodial staff for the same residence hall where we live. The building is this converted Victorian house, beautiful from the outside, creaky and weird on the inside. The university gave us a ground floor unit as part of Diane's employment package, so we have been sharing it for about 3 years now. Last Tuesday, I needed pigment powders I had stored in a supply closet on the top floor. The closet has a ceiling panel that leads to a crawl space above the 4th floor. I was told when we moved in that it was sealed shut, bolted from the other side, no access. But when I pushed a box aside and looked up, the panel was just sitting there, loose. I climbed up with my phone flashlight. The crawl space runs the full length of the building. About 15 feet in, I found a rolled-up sleeping bag, a pillow with no case, and 6 empty water bottles lined up against the wall. Someone had been living up there. My stomach dropped, but the worst part was the manila envelope tucked inside the sleeping bag. Every photo inside was of me or Diane. Dozens of them, printed on regular paper, spanning what looked like 2 years based on my hair length and the seasons visible through windows. Some were taken outside the building, some in hallways, but several were shot from directly above, the angle of the heating vent over my bed. One photo showed me asleep in my bed, a timestamp printed in the corner. 11 days ago. Someone had been watching her from inches away, and the panel was never sealed.
She did not sleep that night. The first thing I did was call Priya. She is my coworker at the restoration lab, and honestly, my closest friend on campus. I could barely get the words out. She came over within 20 minutes, and I handed her the envelope without explaining anything because I did not know how to say it out loud yet. We spread the photos across my bed, the same bed someone had been watching from above, and started going through them slowly. They were organized. That is what got me. Not scattered, not random. Whoever did this had arranged them in order, oldest to newest. The early ones were taken outside. Me walking to the arts building, Diane unlocking the side entrance on a Saturday morning, normal angles like someone standing across the street with a long lens. Then the hallway shots started. Me carrying supplies up the stairwell, Diane talking to one of her staff near the laundry room, and then the vent photos. In one of them, I could read the screen of my laptop. I was working on a grant proposal. I remember the specific draft because I ended up rewriting it entirely. In another, you could see the birthday card Priya gave me on my nightstand, which means it was taken sometime after October. I showed Diane everything. I expected her to lose it. She went pale, sat down heavily on the kitchen chair, and said almost nothing for a full minute. Then she told me we should not call the police yet. She said it was probably a maintenance worker who had access to the crawl space and maybe took some pictures as a sick joke. She said calling the cops would bring the university down on us and we could lose the unit. I kept waiting for the fear to hit her. It never did. She looked like someone who had just been caught, not someone who had just found out her daughter was being watched. I packed a bag and went to Priya's apartment. I lay on her couch staring at the ceiling and thinking about every single night I had fallen asleep in that bed with someone directly above me. Diane knew something. Sophie was sure of it now. The next morning, Sophie went back alone. I waited until Diane left for her shift, and then I went straight up into the crawl space with a proper flashlight and my phone recording everything. It was worse than I thought. Beyond the sleeping bag I had already found, there was a phone charger plugged into an extension cord that someone had run from a junction box near the rafters. Food wrappers, granola bars, crackers, the cheap kind you buy in bulk. A wool blanket folded neatly beside the sleeping bag. This was not someone who crashed up there once or twice. This was a routine. The sleeping bag had side pockets I had not checked the first time. I made myself open them, but they were empty, or at least I thought they were. I moved to the vent above my bed, and that is when I felt something crack inside me. The grate had been modified. Someone had lined the edges with strips of adhesive felt so it could be lifted out and set back down without making a sound. From the crawlspace side, you could remove it with 2 fingers. I called campus security from Priya's phone because my hands would not stop shaking. 2 officers came within the hour. They photographed everything. They asked me who had building access, and I watched their faces change when I explained that my mother managed the entire custodial operation and held master keys to every door and utility panel in the building. They interviewed Diane that afternoon. She told them she had no idea anyone had been in the crawlspace. She said the panel was supposed to be sealed. She gave short answers and would not make eye contact with me afterward. That night, I sat in Priya's kitchen, trying to understand how someone got into a locked building, up 4 flights of stairs, and into a crawl space repeatedly over 2 years without ever being seen, in a building where my mother controlled every key and every access log. Void perception. The vent angle photo is what broke me. He was literally watching you sleep from 2 feet above your head. I would never feel safe in a bed again. Dead signal. I keep thinking about the note your mom wrote. She gave him a deadline instead of calling the police. She negotiated with him like it was a lease dispute, not her daughter being surveilled. Throwaway menace. I work in campus housing, and I want to be clear. Ceiling crawl spaces in old residence halls are accessible from multiple entry points. He may not have only used the one you found. This is what I have been losing sleep over. When campus security came, they found drag marks in the dust leading to a second hatch that opens above the shared hallway bathroom on our floor. I never even knew that hatch existed. My mother did. She has the building schematics for her custodial work. She would have known he could reach the bathroom too. The building had been his the whole time. Diane had made sure of it. Then Sophie posted the update. My mother knew who was living above us the entire time. I went back to the crawl space one more time. I needed to check the sleeping bag pockets again, because something had been nagging at me. I remembered feeling a lump in the side pocket, but I had been too panicked to look carefully. This time I found a folded piece of paper pressed flat against the bottom seam. It was a note in my mother's handwriting. I know her handwriting the way I know the grain patterns on the oak panels I restore every day. There is no question. It read, "You need to leave by March, or I am calling them." I drove to the custodial office and confronted Diane in the hallway before she could disappear into a supply room. She broke down within minutes. The person living in the crawl space was her brother Ray, my uncle. He was paroled about 2 years ago after serving 9 years for aggravated assault. His halfway housing fell through, and Diane decided to hide him in the crawl space rather than let him end up on the street. She swore to me that Ray never came down into our unit. She said he only used the crawl space to sleep, and that she brought him food and water when I was at the lab. I asked her about the photos. She went quiet. I told her about the vent grate lined with felt, about the pictures taken from directly above my bed, about the one of me asleep time-stamped 11 days ago. She had nothing to say. The last photo in the envelope was not of me sleeping. It was a careful, steady close-up of my building key card sitting on my nightstand next to a sticky note where I had written the 6-digit door code. He did not just watch me. He was documenting how to get in. Nocturnal archive. The fact that he photographed your key card and door code means he was planning for permanent access. This was not someone just sleeping rough. This was methodical. Midwest mom of. Your mother chose her brother over your safety for 2 years. That is not love. That is complicity. I am so sorry, Sophie. Dead signal. And the worst part is she only set a deadline for him to leave. She still was not going to tell Sophie. If Sophie had not found that crawl space herself, Diane would have just waited for Ray to quietly disappear and never mentioned any of it. Sophie ended her post with this. I moved into Priya's apartment that same night. I did not go back to the unit for my things until campus security escorted me 2 days later. Police were brought in fully after I showed them the note in Diane's handwriting and the photographs. They took everything as evidence.
I had already photographed each page on my phone before handing the envelope over, which the officer said was smart. Ray was picked up 48 hours later at a bus depot 2 towns over. He had a duffel bag with him and nothing else. His parole officer confirmed he had missed 3 check-ins and that Diane had never registered her address as his place of residence, which she was legally required to do if she was housing him in any capacity. I do not know what charges are being filed yet. I know there are several on the table. I have not spoken to Diane since the night I confronted her in that hallway. She has called 9 times. I have not picked up. Priya says I should take my time, and I am trying to. But what keeps me awake is not the photos or the crawl space or even Ray. It is the math. 2 years. Over 700 nights where my mother tucked me in with a good night text from the next room, knowing her brother was above us in the dark. She heard me tell her I felt safe in that building. She watched me fall asleep with my door unlocked because I trusted her. She chose his secret over my safety every single day for 2 years, and she was never going to tell me. I restore damaged things for a living. I fix what time and neglect have broken. But I do not know how to fix this. I do not think I am supposed to. Legal Beagle. If he was on parole, contact his parole officer immediately. Unauthorized residency and what amounts to voyeurism will send him back. Document the photos before police take them as evidence. On to the next one. I, 35F, went to a spa retreat my coworker recommended, and the massage therapist whispered things about me that nobody alive should know. Posted to r/offmychest by Jess Cottage Quiet 3 days ago. I still do not know how to write this down without sounding like I have lost my mind. I am a 35-year-old librarian. I live alone in a small cottage about 40 minutes outside of town, surrounded by fields and not much else. It is quiet out here. That is what I wanted after my mother passed 4 years ago. The grief never really left. It just got quieter, like everything else in my life. My coworker Nadine had been telling me for months about this wellness retreat she found, a secluded spa place out in the countryside, tucked behind old-growth trees at the end of a gravel road. She would not stop talking about it, how it changed her energy, how the therapists there were gifted. I kept saying no, but eventually I ran out of excuses, and honestly, I was so tired. I booked a weekend. When I arrived, the grounds were beautiful. Stone paths through wildflower beds, no cell signal, no noise. They walked me to a candlelit room for my deep tissue session. The therapist was a woman, maybe mid-40s, soft voice. She started working on my shoulders. I closed my eyes. Then she leaned close to my ear and whispered 4 words, 4 specific words. The exact words I wrote in a sealed letter I keep in my nightstand drawer. A letter addressed to my dead mother that I wrote the week after she died. I have never read that letter aloud. I have never told a single living person what it says. Not my sister Brooke, not Nadine, not anyone. She said those 4 words and then kept working on my back like nothing happened. I did not move. I did not speak. I just lay there with my heart slamming against the table, trying to understand what had just come out of that woman's mouth. She never got up from that table, not for a long time.
The session ended, but the words did not. I finished the massage in complete silence. When she told me we were done, I sat up, wrapped the robe around myself, and walked back to my room on legs that felt borrowed from someone else. I sat on the edge of the bed shaking. Not crying, just shaking. And as I sat there, the rest of the session came flooding back. Because it was not just the 4 words from the letter. During the massage, maybe 10 minutes before that, she had called me Jessamine. That was the name my mother used for me when I was small. Not Jessica. Jessamine. My mother made it up. It was not a real name. It was her thing, her private word for me. The only other person alive who knows it is my sister Brooke, and Brooke lives 3 states away. Then there was something else. At one point, the therapist had murmured, almost under her breath, "You are still here. You did not leave." That is the exact phrase I repeat to myself when I am having a panic attack. I have never said it out loud to another person. I developed it in therapy years ago, and it lives inside my head and nowhere else. I sat in that room and went through every possibility. Lucky guess? No. Cold reading. Not this specific. I thought about packing my bag and driving home right then, but I could not make myself move. I texted Brooke something casual, "Hey, thinking about you," because I did not know how to say what I actually needed to say. I thought about walking to the front desk and asking to speak with the therapist, but what would I even ask? How did you know? She would deny it or smile through it, and I would sound unhinged. That night, I lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling of a room that felt exactly like my cottage. Same silence, same isolation, same feeling of being completely alone with something I could not explain. I did not sleep. But by morning, I knew I was not leaving yet. Not until I understood how she knew the things she knew. The retreat had one more day. Jessica intended to use it. She went home. But the questions followed her through the door. The next morning, I walked around the retreat like nothing was wrong. I smiled at the front desk. I ate breakfast in the garden. The whole time I was mapping the building in my head, watching where staff came and went. Around midday, I found a corridor behind the main treatment rooms. The door to what looked like a staff break room was propped open with a wedge. I stepped inside. There was a small table by the window with a leather portfolio sitting on it, dark brown, worn at the edges. I reached for it and then heard footsteps in the hallway. I walked out before anyone saw me. I drove home that afternoon with my hands tight on the wheel the entire way. Back in my cottage, I started going through every conversation I have ever had with Nadine. Every lunch break, every car ride to the branch meeting, every text thread. I was looking for the moment I might have slipped. The moment I might have mentioned Jessamine, or the letter, or the words I used during panic attacks. There was no moment. I never told her. I never told anyone. I called Brooke that evening and tried to keep my voice steady. I asked her if she had ever spoken to Nadine or met her at any point. Brooke said she did not even know who Nadine was. She had never heard the name. That was when the cottage started to feel different. The same silence I had loved for 4 years suddenly felt like it was holding its breath. I kept glancing at the windows. I started checking the locks twice before bed. I am sitting here now and I do not know what to do. Someone knew things about me that I have never shared with a living person, and I do not have a single explanation that makes sense. The comments had plenty of explanations. None of them were comforting. Nocturnal Reader. The fact that she whispered words from a sealed letter is genuinely one of the most violating things I have ever read on here. That is not intuition. That is theft of something sacred. Plants in Panic. Nadine drove to your house 3 times while you were at work. 3 times. That is not a friend. That is someone casing your life. I sat in my car watching that footage on loop for almost an hour. The worst part is that on one of the visits, she was there for over 90 minutes. I keep thinking about what she touched, what she read, what she photographed. We shared tea in that kitchen. She knew where I kept my spare key because I told her once when she dropped off a book for me. I handed her the access to my entire life, and she used it like a research project. A few days later, Jessica came back with an update. I found the files, and it was worse than I thought. I drove back to the retreat on Wednesday. I waited in my car in the lot until I saw the therapist walk into a treatment room with another guest. Then I went inside and headed straight for the staff corridor. The break room door was closed this time, but unlocked. The leather portfolio was still on the table. I opened it, and my hands have not stopped shaking since. Inside were typed dossiers organized by guest name, each one clipped to a sheet listing a referral source. I found mine near the back. It was 11 pages long. At the top of the first page, under referral source, it said, Nadine. 11 pages about me. The dossier included the contents of the letter in my nightstand. Not a summary, the actual words I wrote. It described my private notebooks, the ones I keep in my bedroom closet. It listed the pet name Jessamine and noted that it was used exclusively by my late mother. It had the phrase I used during panic attacks written out in quotation marks. None of this is information I have ever given Nadine, which means someone was inside my cottage. When I got home, I pulled up the security camera footage from the 3 weeks before my trip. Nadine's car was parked on my gravel lane on 3 separate afternoons while I was at work. 3 times she came to my home while I was gone. This was not a psychic. This was not intuition. This was my coworker methodically going through my most private belongings and feeding every piece of my grief to a stranger in a dark room so she could whisper it back to me like a revelation. Subordimenta. 11 pages. She wrote 11 pages about you. I cannot get past that number. What could possibly fill 11 pages about a coworker? Throwaway. Dusk. I used to work at a boutique wellness center, and there were absolutely places that did intake dossiers like this. They called it pre-session profiling. It is more common than people think. Subordimenta. This is horrifying context. So the therapist was not even pretending to be psychic. She was just reading a script someone compiled from stolen private material and performing intimacy. That somehow makes it worse. The envelope told her everything she needed to know. I photographed every page of the dossier before I left that break room, all 11 pages. I saved the security camera footage to a USB drive the same night. The next morning, I walked into the police station and filed a report. I gave them everything, the photos, the footage, the timeline. Then I called my branch manager and requested a transfer. I did not explain why. I just said I needed to move to a different location and I needed it as soon as possible. She did not push. Nadine was suspended the following week pending an internal investigation. I have not spoken to her. I do not plan to. When I got home after filing the report, I went to my nightstand and took out the envelope, the sealed letter I wrote to my mother the week after she died. I held it up to the light and looked at it closely for the first time in years. There was a small crease along the flap, faint but there. Someone had steamed it open and pressed it shut again. They read the last thing I ever wrote to my mother. They read words I put down on paper while I was still raw with grief, words that were never meant for anyone, and they handed them to a woman in a candlelit room so she could whisper them into my ear like she had pulled them from the air. I have not slept in the cottage since I found that crease. I packed a bag that same evening and drove to Brooks Place. I am still here. I do not know if I am going back. The cottage was supposed to be the one place in the world that was entirely mine, quiet and safe and untouched. It is none of those things now. Quiet hollow. Please tell me you photographed every page of that dossier before you left. That is evidence. Redlined veins. The sealed envelope detail at the end destroyed me. Someone steamed open a letter you wrote to your dead mother. I am so sorry, Jessica. On to the next one. My classmate has been leaving me gifts that prove he's been inside my house, and I live 30 minutes from anyone. Posted by throwaway_Marcus Rural to r/let's not meet 6 days ago. Someone had been standing in her hallway while she slept. I am a 32-year-old woman. I work as a veterinary technician, and I live in a rural cottage about 30 minutes from the nearest neighbor with my younger sister, Jenna. I picked this place on purpose. After 6 years of back-to-back emergency shifts at the clinic, the silence out here felt like medicine. No traffic, no sirens, just wind through the fields and my dog losing his mind over rabbits. A few months ago, I enrolled in an evening continuing education certification course at the community college in town. That is where I met Derek. Quiet guy, sat 2 rows behind me, barely spoke unless called on. I did not think much of him at first. Then, the gifts started. The first one was a small potted succulent, sitting on my porch one morning with no note. I figured maybe a neighbor from down the road was being friendly, even though my nearest neighbor is a cattle rancher who has never said more than 4 words to me. A A few days later, I found a hand-drawn sketch of my dog rolled up and tucked into the screen door. It was detailed. The brown and white patches were right. The shape of his ears was right. Even the red collar was right. I have never posted a photo of that dog online. Not once. I told myself maybe someone saw him through the fence. I almost believed it. Then came the third gift, a framed photograph propped against the front door. It was a picture of my hallway. My hallway, taken from inside the cottage, at night. The timestamp on the image read 2:14 in the morning on a Tuesday. Jenna and I were both home that night. We were asleep. Someone stood inside my home in the dark, took that photo, printed it, framed it, and left it for me like a love letter. I think I know who it is. There's a guy in my class named Derek, and I am almost certain it is him. I am about to find out how wrong I am. She was not even close. The gifts were not random. They were inventory. After the hallway photo, I went back through everything. The succulent on the porch? It is a jade plant, the same species I keep on my kitchen windowsill. You would not know that from the outside. The kitchen window faces the back of the property, and the blinds are always drawn. Someone had been inside and seen it. The dog sketch was worse the second time I looked at it. My dog has a small scar on his left ear from a barbed wire incident 2 years ago. It is barely visible unless you are right next to him, scratching his head. The sketch included it. Every detail, perfect. I started walking through the cottage looking for anything else that felt wrong. A kitchen drawer I always keep closed was cracked open about an inch. The bath towel in the hallway bathroom was folded in thirds. I fold mine in half, always have. The window latch in the spare bedroom was unlocked. I know I locked it because I check every window before bed. It is a habit I have had since I moved out here. I asked Jenna if she had noticed anything strange. She told me I was spiraling. She said the drawer probably slid open on its own and that she might have refolded the towel without thinking. She was not worried. I was. I kept thinking about Derek. He sits 2 rows behind me in class. A few weeks ago he asked where I lived, just casual small talk, and I mentioned the rural road without thinking much of it. He always lingers after class, packing his bags slowly, avoiding eye contact with everyone. Quiet in a way that felt shy at first, but now felt calculated. I should mention, my former coworker Elliot got fired from the clinic about 8 months ago. Behavioral issues, that is all I was told. I had not thought about him since. He did not even cross my mind. I bought a cheap wireless camera and stuck it on the porch railing. 3 nights of footage and nothing. Whoever this was knew where to step or when to come. I started sleeping with a kitchen knife under my pillow. The quiet I moved out here for does not feel like medicine anymore. It feels like a wall between me and anyone who could help. Next class is Thursday. I'm going to confront Derek directly. She had the wrong name in her head. Derek was not the answer she expected. Thursday came and I walked into class ready to confront him. But Derek smiled at me when I sat down, asked how my week was going, offered me a pen when mine ran out of ink. He was relaxed. Normal. I could not square that with the person I had built in my head. So instead of accusing him, I just asked casually if he had ever driven out my way. He laughed and said he lives on the opposite side of town and does not even own a car. He rides to class with another student who lives in his apartment complex. The way he said it was so offhand, so unbothered, that I believed him immediately. That made everything worse. I drove home with my hands shaking on the wheel. When I got to the cottage, there was a plastic bag on the porch. Inside was a pressed wildflower, the kind that only grows in the meadow directly behind our property. Tucked in with it was a handwritten note. "You look tired today. Rest well." Whoever wrote it had seen me that same evening. I called the non-emergency police line. They took a report and told me that without camera footage or an explicit threat, there was not much they could do. They suggested I keep documenting. I sat Jenna down after the call and pushed harder than before. I asked if anyone had come by the cottage while I was at class, anyone at all. She got quiet. Then she said that a few weeks ago a man stopped by and told her he was Derek from my course. He said he wanted to leave a surprise for me. Jenna thought it was sweet. She let him inside. She let him look around. I asked her to describe him. "Taller than me," she said. "Brown hair, thin build, older looking." That is not Derek. Derek is short, stocky, blonde. The person who had been inside my home gave my sister a fake name, walked through our rooms, and she opened the door for him. Velvet Static. The fact that he used another real person's name to get access through your sister is calculated on a level that terrifies me. That is not impulsive. That is planned. Quiet Radio FM. I grew up rural, and everyone says isolation equals safety. It does not. It equals nobody hearing you, nobody seeing a strange car, nobody noticing a pattern. I'm glad you are both okay. Dull Hatchet. The part about the candle scent matching the one in your bathroom made my stomach drop. That is not something you notice from outside a window. He was in your private spaces. That was the gift that broke something in me. I bought that candle at a small shop 2 towns over. It is not a brand you find online. He had to have stood in my bathroom close enough to read the label off the jar. I threw every candle in the house away that night, and I still cannot light one. The name she needed was one she had already forgotten. A few days later, she came back with an update. They found his car behind our property with a journal dating back 2 years. I showed Derek the description Jenna gave me. His face went white. He told me he had never been to my property, never spoken to my sister, and that whoever used his name knew enough about our class to make it believable. He looked scared for me, genuinely scared, and I believed him completely. That night I was scrolling back through the comments on my original post, and one of them asked about former coworkers who might hold a grudge. The name hit me like a wall. Elliot. He was fired from the veterinary clinic about 8 months ago. I was told it was behavioral issues, but I never got details, and I never asked. He was quiet at work, kept to himself, and after he was let go, I did not think about him once. I gave his full name to the police the next morning. Within 48 hours, they found a vehicle registered to Elliot parked on a disused farm track that runs behind our property. I did not even know that track existed. It connects to a county road about 2 miles east, and you cannot see it from the cottage. Inside the car, they found binoculars, printed photographs of the cottage from multiple angles, photographs of me taken through windows, and a personal journal. The journal is what destroyed me. The first entry was dated 2 full years before Elliot ever applied to work at the clinic. He did not become fixated on me after we met at work. He got the job to be near me. Everything I thought I understood about the timeline was wrong. The obsession came first. The employment was just a tool. Elliot was arrested, and I was granted a restraining order the same week. Redditor XX. Please tell me you got new locks the same day you found that photo. 30 minutes from anyone means 30 minutes from help. No more creek walks. 2 years before he even worked at your clinic? I need you to really sit with what that means. He built his entire employment around proximity to you. Quiet Radio FM. This is what makes it different from a workplace crush that went sideways. He relocated his life. He sat through an interview, got hired, clocked in every day for months, all as infrastructure for an obsession. That level of patience is the part that should scare everyone reading this. The locks changed. The quiet did not come back. We replaced every lock in the cottage within 2 days. Deadbolts on both doors, new latches on every window, a proper alarm system with sensors on every entry point. The cheap porch camera got pulled down and replaced with 4 weatherproof cameras covering every angle of the property, including that farm track I never knew existed. The house is more secure now than it has ever been. It does not feel more secure. Jenna and I are still living together. She has not stopped apologizing. She cries about it at least once a week, sometimes more, and I know she was manipulated. I know that Elliot showed up with a name, a story, and a smile, and Jenna had no reason to doubt him. She was being kind. But I cannot look at her some days without feeling something ugly rise up in my chest. She let a stranger walk through our home. She watched him look at our things and thought it was romantic. I hate that I am angry at her, and I hate that I cannot stop. The thing I keep circling back to is why I moved out here in the first place. I wanted distance. I wanted 30 minutes of empty road between me and everyone else because I thought that distance meant safety. But all it really meant was that nobody could see a strange car parked on a back road. Nobody walked past the porch. Nobody heard anything. The isolation did not protect me. It protected him. The restraining order is in place. Elliot is out on bail with conditions.
The journal is the thing I cannot put down in my mind. 2 years before he ever applied to the clinic. 2 years before I ever learned his name. I have gone through every memory I have, and I cannot find him. I do not know where he first saw me or what made him decide I was the one. I do not know if I will ever know. Orange peel vibes. Your sister should not blame herself. He deliberately chose the one person in your life who would open the door without questioning it. That is predatory social engineering. On to the next one. My neighbor, a woman in her 50s, has been leaving homemade jam at our door every week labeled with my name and specific dates. My mother, 61, recognized the handwriting and now she won't speak to me about it. Posted to r/offmychest 5 days ago by Rooftop Laura, 33. I'm 33, I work as a hairstylist, and I live with my mother Dorothy in a rooftop apartment. It has been just the two of us since my father Gerald passed 7 years ago. 4 months back, a woman named Renee moved into the unit directly below us. She seemed perfectly normal, mid-50s, polite, kept to herself during the week. Then, the first Sunday after she settled in, I found a jar of homemade jam sitting on our doormat, hand-labeled in neat cursive with my full name and a date. I figured it was some kind of batch number or recipe tracking system she had going. I thanked her in the hallway, she smiled, said she hoped I liked blackberry. The next Sunday, there was another jar, different date on the label. Then another, every single week without fail. I told my coworker and close friend Sasha about it, and she thought it was the sweetest thing. Said I had won the neighbor lottery. I never thought twice. I just lined them up on the kitchen shelf. 15 jars, maybe more. Last Sunday, I was running late for a morning shift, and the jar was still on the mat when Dorothy came out to water the landing plants. She picked it up before I could grab it. I watched her read the label, and the color just left her face. Her hands were shaking so badly she nearly dropped it. She told me the handwriting on that jar was identical to my father's, the same slanted cursive he used on every birthday card he ever gave me. And the date on the label matched an entry he used to make in a personal journal he kept locked in his desk drawer. A journal Dorothy told me she had destroyed after he died. She would not say another word. She put the jar down on the counter like it burned her and walked into her bedroom and shut the door. My father has been dead for 7 years, and a woman I barely know is writing in his hand. She had 15 jars and no answers. Laura couldn't leave it alone. I need to explain something about my father. Gerald was not a loud man. He was not the dad who showed up to every game or made a scene at school pickup. He worked, he came home, he sat in his chair by the window and read. When I was 26 and already cutting hair full-time, he had a heart attack in that chair. I found out from Dorothy. She called me at the salon between clients. That was the kind of family we were. My mother managed the information, and I received it when she decided I should. I always believed he loved me. He just did not know how to say it out loud. After Dorothy told me about the handwriting, I sat on the kitchen floor with every jar lined up in front of me. I compared the labels to a birthday card I still keep in my nightstand, the last one he gave me for my 25th. The slanted cursive was identical. Not similar, identical. Then I started looking at the dates. One matched my first day of primary school. Another was the date of a piano recital I did when I was 9. Another was the exact day I received my hairstyling license. These were not batch numbers. I went to Dorothy's room and asked her point blank what was going on. She told me to throw every jar in the bin and never speak to Renee again. That was it. Door closed. I called Sasha that night and told her everything. She said I had to go talk to Renee myself because nobody else was going to give me a straight answer. So I did. I stood outside Renee's door for what felt like 10 minutes before I knocked. She opened it like she had been expecting me, calm, warm, completely unsurprised. She invited me in, and I stepped past her into the hallway. That is when I saw it. A framed photograph on the shelf beside her coat hooks. A young girl, maybe 7 or 8, smiling wide, standing next to my father Gerald with his arm around her shoulder. I had never seen that child before in my life. Gerald's arm around a stranger's daughter, framed like family. Renee did not hesitate. She sat me down at her kitchen table and talked like she had been waiting years for someone to ask. She told me she knew my father Gerald for over 15 years. Not as a neighbor, not as a friend, as his partner. a parallel life he kept running alongside ours the entire time I was growing up. She said Dorothy knew. Maybe not every detail, but enough. Then Renee told me she had a daughter with him, a girl named Claire, my half-sister. I sat there with my hands flat on the table because I thought if I moved, I would fall apart. Claire died in a car accident 9 years ago, 2 years before Gerald. She was 19. I never knew she existed. Renee explained the jam. Gerald kept that journal where he wrote down dates that mattered in my life. Milestones, firsts, things he noticed but never said out loud to me or Dorothy. And he and Claire had a ritual. On each of those dates, they would cook preserves together. It was their way of marking my life from the outside, celebrating me from a distance I did not even know existed. After Claire died and then Gerald, Renee was alone with the recipes and the journal pages she had kept. She moved into our building on purpose, not to hurt anyone. She is a woman who lost a daughter and a partner within 2 years of each other, and she is holding on to the only ritual she has left. When I left her apartment, I stood in the stairwell between her floor and mine for I do not know how long. My father had a whole other family. My mother knew, and a dead girl I never met used to make jam in my name. Midnight Fig Tree. The handwriting detail made my stomach drop. Your mother recognized it instantly and just shut down? That is not a normal grief reaction. That is someone who has been sitting on something for years. Lake County Kid. The part that wrecked me is that she labeled every jar with your name specifically. Not the flat number, not to the household. She wanted you to know these were for you and only you. That is intimate in a way that makes my skin crawl. Quiet porch. I know everyone is focused on Renee, but can we talk about Dorothy destroying the journal? That is a woman who made a calculated decision about what version of your father you were allowed to know. You are right, and that is the part I keep circling back to. She told me she burned it so I would not have to read anything painful. But I asked her point blank if she read it first, and she went quiet for a long time, and then said yes. She read the whole thing. She decided what I could handle and what I could not, and she made that choice when I was 26 years old, not a child. I do not know how to sit across from her at breakfast anymore. 2 days later, Laura posted an update. I read the journal pages, and I need to talk about my dad. I confronted Dorothy last night. No room to retreat, no door to close. I sat at the kitchen table and told her I was not leaving until she talked to me. She held out for almost an hour. Then she broke. She told me she knew about Gerald and Renee for over a decade before he died. She knew about Claire. She knew about the parallel life, and she said nothing to me. Not once, not ever. When Gerald died, she found his journal in the desk drawer, and she read every page. Then she destroyed it. But here is the part that gutted me. She did not burn it to protect me from pain. She burned it because Gerald wrote about Claire with a tenderness and detail he never used when writing about me. Dorothy could not stand the idea that I might read those pages and see my father describing another girl as if she were the center of his world. She was not protecting me. She was protecting the version of him she needed me to believe in. I went back downstairs to Renee's flat. I asked her if she had anything left from the journal. She opened a drawer and pulled out a stack of photocopied pages. She had copied them years ago, before giving the original back to Gerald. I sat on her couch and read my father's handwriting describing my school recital when I was 9. He wrote down what I was wearing, a blue cardigan Dorothy had ironed that morning. He noted the song I sang. He described sitting in the back row so Dorothy would not see him. My mother never once mentioned that he was there. She did not know. He watched me from the back of the room and wrote it all down, and the only person who ever read it was a woman I met 4 months ago. Throwaway Half Moon. This reads like something out of a novel, but I believe every word of it. The jam labels being dated to specific journal entries is the kind of detail no one would make up. Not your darling. I am so sorry, Laura. The fact that Renee moved into your building on purpose is what gets me. She sought you out. That is not casual, no matter how you frame it. Spool and thread. Exactly this.
People in the comments saying, "Oh, she is just a grieving woman," are missing the point. Grief does not make you hunt down your dead partner's other daughter and move into her building and start a weekly ritual with her. That is obsession wearing a house dress and carrying a mason jar. Laura did not leave. She did not forgive. I am still in the rooftop apartment. Dorothy is still here. We move around each other like strangers sharing a waiting room. I have not gone back to Renee's door, and she has not knocked on mine. Sunday came and went, and there was no jar on the mat. I do not know what that means. I sat in the kitchen last night with a jar of blackberry jam dated to my 8th birthday. I held it under the light and read my father's handwriting on the label. I thought about what the photocopied journal page said about that date. He wrote about a girl in a yellow dress with a gap in her teeth who waved at the whole audience even though she could not see past the stage lights. That was me. He was there and I did not know. I cannot figure out who deserves my anger. Gerald, for splitting himself between two families and giving pieces of his attention to each while pretending both had the whole thing? Dorothy, for reading his journal and choosing to burn it rather than let me see how much of my father existed outside the life she managed. Renee, for wrapping the truth in preserves and leaving it at my door week after week like some kind of grief ritual I never consented to. The jam is just jam. The poison was always the silence. I still have every jar. I have not opened a single one. I do not know if I ever will. But my father's handwriting is the closest thing to his voice that I have left, and a stranger 1 floor below me kept it safer than my own mother did. Spool and thread. Please do not eat any more of the jam. I do not care how innocent it seems. Someone who deliberately moved into your building and is leaving food labeled with information from a dead man's private journal is not stable. Thanks for watching, and if these stories stick with you, subscribing really does help.